everybody. Hello, and welcome back to the channel. My name is Zanele Ruth Majazi. I am a South African educator currently teaching English in South Korea. If you're new to the channel, welcome. Thank you for stopping by. And to my returning subscribers, I really appreciate you. We are almost on 2,000 subscribers, and it wouldn't have been possible without you. I also want to send my heartfelt thanks to my online community. The past few weeks have been very hard. I found myself missing home. I was just feeling so isolated, and I'm grateful that I could share some of my feelings on social media and have the support and love that I would still get if I was back home. So I'm really grateful to everyone who's been very supportive and kind and caring towards me. Thank you. On today's video, I want to share some practical interview tips and questions for applicants who are waiting for their EPIK interview. The applications opened in August, I think the 1st of August, and this is for the 2023 February intake. So interviews are ongoing, and I'm getting a lot of questions on social media, people saying, hey, I got my interview, how do I prepare? What will they ask? What is the atmosphere in the interview? So I just wanna tell you what my experience was, and hopefully that can help you get a picture of what it will be like. But the one thing I want to start off with is by saying that the EPIK application is very long, okay? The application itself, the application form, has about 4 essays that you really need to think carefully about. It has a lesson plan that you need to write and include in the application. What I'm trying to say is if you got the interview, it means you had a really good application, and there's very little you can do to mess up the interview. Literally, I think one of the best ways to not pass the interview is to not show up. This is to say, the EPIK interview isn't hard, okay? It's just a conversation talking through the written application that you made. And I think more importantly, it's for the interviewers and for the EPIK organization to put a face to the name. They've seen the written form of what you think, why you want to come to South Korea, but the interview is literally just to see your face, hear you speak, and see some of the things that you would do or implement in the classroom. So that's really it. Just relax. It's going to be calm. It's going to be okay. So this leads me to my next point about interview prep for EPIK. Go through your application, okay? For me, it took me about 2 weeks to write the essays because I really wanted to think carefully and thoroughly about my responses so that I don't forget them, so that I know that they come straight from my heart. So just go back to your application, and the answers that you wrote there, you must know. I'm not saying you should cram them, but know them because most of the questions will be some form of the application questions. So just know what you said in the application form, especially because the interviewer will have your application printed on paper. They'll be going through it as they talk to you. So if you say something that's very different from what you wrote, I think that might ring some alarm bells. I don't know, just me. But yeah, I would say go through your interview. No, as you prepare for the interview, go through the application you wrote, and that's going to come in handy in terms of not being too shocked. Like when you hear the questions, they will sound familiar. So check how the questions were asked in the application form and try to see how you responded. Okay, so that's the first thing, I think. Secondly, if you don't have a background in teaching, if you're not a qualified educator and you're completely new to teaching, go back to your Tefl course. That's very important because some of the questions will relate to strategies and things you would implement in the classroom. They'll give you hypothetical situations, such as maybe saying you are in a mixed ability class. So some of the learners have a very high command of English, some of the learners have a very low command of English, and some are in the middle range. What will you do to make learners participate? What will you do to make the learners who are on the higher level of English command, to make them feel included, to not feel like what you're doing is too easy, but at the same time also accommodating those who have a very low command of the English language? So these are only questions you'd be able to answer, I think, if you can go back to some of the Tefl things, and if you just watch videos and think about practical ways in which you would include all learners regardless of their abilities. So go back to the Tefl course and some of the tips that you got from there, as well as the lesson plan you made in the Tefl course, just to look at the structure and how a ESL lesson usually works. Okay, so that's another thing, Tefl revision. The next thing I'm going to ask you to do is relax, okay? You got this. Calm down. Because if you are too overwhelmed, if you're overthinking things, if you're practicing questions and answers, if you're doing too much, it might wear you out. And by the time you get to the actual interview, you might just freeze or say answers that you're not proud of. So if you go through your application just once or twice, you will know exactly what you wrote and you will know how to respond. Relax. The interviewers are aware whether or not you have experience teaching English in an Asian country or in a foreign country. If you don't have experience, they will be aware of this. And that's why EPIK is so nice, because there is an orientation program. So they're not going to want you to be like a finished product and to, have all the responses. They know that you might be lacking in some areas, which is why it's important for them to include the orientation program when you first come here. Because at the end of the day, even the things that you say in the interview might just completely fly out of the window by the time you get here and start teaching. Believe me, I know. So don't be very obsessive about, how am I going to sound? Is my accent okay? No. If your interview has been granted, if you've been granted an interview, for me, literally, it means you're in. You just need to relax, show them your confidence, just respond. If you're not sure about something, ask for a second to think, gather your thoughts, and then respond, and then take it from there. Okay, so what I'm going to do now, because as I mentioned earlier, the interview questions are very similar to the application questions. So I have my phone over here. I downloaded my application because I saved it, and I'm going to read you the responses that I made on my application. So I will read just parts of my essay and try to explain further what I said in the interview, because the questions, as I said, were quite similar to what was asked in the application form. So question 1. In the application form, it says, why do you want to teach EFL and why do you want to teach in Korea? So my response was, I am very passionate about the teaching profession, and I'm constantly in search of opportunities to develop my skills and experience as an educator. I completed my undergraduate studies in education, and I'm currently pursuing a master's degree in education, majoring in curriculum studies. I have been teaching English online since August 2021, with the majority of my students being from Asia. I really appreciate and value how the teaching profession cultivates a spirit of lifelong learning, where both students and the teacher learn from each other. I've enjoyed teaching EFL online because it brings the world to me through my screen. I get to learn about different countries that my students are from while helping them improve their English proficiency. Since teaching English to Asian adult students online, I've developed a keen interest in Asian culture and would love an opportunity to experience it firsthand. Upon conducting my research, it came across that the EPIK program would be the perfect fit for me. As one of the fastest growing economies in the world, South Korea's education system is quite advanced and would be a great professional development opportunity for me as a young educator. Moreover, the safety and security aspect of it is also very important to me as a young female who would be living alone. So essentially, the first question, even in the interview, was, hey, welcome. Why do you want to teach English and why do you want to teach in South Korea? So the one thing that I kept milking in my interview is the fact that I'm already an educator, right? So I'm a teacher originally in South Africa and I love the profession. So I wanted it to come across that teaching wouldn't be a hard choice for me to make. Like if I am to live abroad, I better be doing what I love. So I tried to emphasize the fact that I've been teaching, I've been studying further, I've been trying to develop myself as an educator and to try and understand different education systems across the world. And in terms of South Korea, I said I love it because it's safe. Firstly, it's a very fast growing economy. So I am aware that not everyone is an educator, not everyone has a similar background as me in terms of like education and passions and all of that. But at the end of the day, you're coming to South Korea to teach, right? So find similarities between the job that you had before and teaching, or teaching in a foreign country, or relocating, right? One of the things I would say you have to highlight, if you don't have prior professional teaching experience, you can talk about how you've worked with children in the past. You can highlight things like, if you are a Sunday school teacher, hey, I work with children every Sunday, and I really enjoy how I can connect with them, how I can teach them certain life values, and I think it would be an amazing opportunity for me to teach in Korea so that I can continue working with children, because I discovered that is something that I love. So make sure that even if you don't have a background in teaching, just highlight things that would really connect, things that have given you skills that would connect to teaching, especially teaching English in Asia or in South Korea specifically. One way to put a smile on the face of your interviewer is to really think carefully and extensively about your response to the question, why South Korea? Because you're being interviewed by a Korean person who loves their country and wants the best candidates to come here, you need to really wow them. Not to say you need to think about like really fancy answers, but think about something deeper than being exposed to Korean culture by K-dramas or through media. Because we know that more often than not, what we see on K-dramas and other media depictions isn't what the reality will be when we come here. So what I focused on, instead of wanting to experience the culture, is also wanting to learn from the country. As an African person, I come from a continent that is ridden with a lot of problems. We have wars, we have political instability, the list goes on. There's just a lot going on in Africa. But interestingly, South Korea itself as a country experienced these challenges no less than 100 years ago. In 1953, which is very recent, they had the Korean Civil War, and they were able to recover from it. And we have a lot to learn as African people from that. So those are things I spoke about. Because I majored in economics and I'm very interested in developmental economics, I said that I want to take some learnings from the country, and hopefully when I go back home, in whatever capacity I'll go back as, whether I am a leader or I am in academics or I'm a teacher, I want to see how South Korean people themselves contributed towards the catapulting of their country, really, because we see that they're really progressing and they've become the third largest exporter in Asia. So if you mention things like that, if you talk about the country just beyond what we see on K-dramas, because that's a very limited and narrow view, I think you will really put a smile on your interviewer's face. I think immediately after I said that, I told her that I'm currently doing my master's and I'm interested in, research, looking at Korea as a case study, perhaps looking at prospects of studying in the country in future. She was really just like prompting me, asking me more questions in relation to that, and asking me what I would do my research in if I was to enroll at a university here. So I think after that question, really everything else she asked me was just formality. She was really impressed, and you need to think about the things that you will say that will stand out in your interview. So we've just concluded the first part where we answer the question, why teach EFL and why specifically South Korea? Now we're going to move to the second question, which relates to your teaching philosophy. In the application, it reads, explain your teaching philosophy briefly. How will you connect your background, skills, and experiences to teaching English in your classroom? How do you plan to further develop your teaching skills? So I'll start with the last part, okay? How do you plan to further develop your teaching skills? For me, I am an educator professionally, but I didn't qualify or I didn't complete my first degree in English. I'm not a language teacher. So I was aware of the gap, the professional gap that I have in terms of having majored in economics and now wanting to teach English in South Korea. So that's something I highlighted to say, even though I'm an educator back home, I am aware that I'm not a language teacher, I'm not an English teacher, so I have a lot to learn in terms of navigating the ESL space, especially because even with my online teaching experience, I taught mostly Chinese adult students. So these people have different needs from the learners that I'm dealing with now, who are middle school and high school kids, right? So just be aware of the professional gaps that you have. And the obvious professional gap you will have if you don't have teaching experience will be that you've never taught before. So you will have to be open to learning about yourself and discovering what is your teaching style. How do you become more aware and observant of learners' needs? How do you continue creating lessons that are interesting, that cater to the learners' needs? And especially if you have mixed ability classrooms, right? You might find learners that are very proficient in English, others in the middle, others not proficient. So that might be a challenge. And these are things that are a professional development gap for most of us, even if you've done ESL online. But the thing of dealing with people who aren't on the same level of understanding English in the same lesson is very hard. So those are some of the things you can highlight in terms of how you want to further develop your teaching. You can say, I will take courses, continuously, or I will do a postgraduate certificate in education, because I've seen that a lot of people want to do their PGCE once they start doing ESL. So things like that will contribute towards you being a better professional in terms of education. Okay, so I'll just read my teaching philosophy quickly. The principles underlining my teaching philosophy are prioritizing student needs at all times, creating a classroom environment which promotes student participation, being innovative in the planning and delivery of all lessons. To prioritize student needs, I am observant in all my encounters with them so I can identify their different learning styles, personalities, strengths, and weaknesses. This way, I'm able to enhance my practice and implement teaching approaches which are suitable for a specific class group or individual student. The second principle is conducting lessons in a way which stimulates and encourages student participation. Student engagement is essential in language learning, as students get to practice their speaking or reading and writing skills when they participate in class. It is my role as a teacher to ensure that all students feel free, comfortable, and safe to engage in classroom activities. So basically, even in the interview, they asked, how do you engage with learners or students? How do you approach lesson planning? How do you approach talking to students even outside of the teaching time that you have with them? So I said I want to create opportunities where I can engage with them even outside of teaching time, so that I can see their different personalities, their different learning styles, just who they are and their interests, so that I can incorporate some of those things into the lessons. And this has really helped. Like, I didn't say this just for the essay. I said it, and really now I have to apply it, because you create a lesson plan, you go to the classroom and you teach kids something that you like, and it fails. So you have to be very aware and in tune with what's happening with K-pop, with K-dramas. I know the current trending K-drama right now is Extraordinary Attorney Woo, and I had to watch the K-drama and find some things that are funny and follow some TikTok Korean accounts, so that I could see things that interest the kids and incorporate those in some of the warm-ups that I do in the class. So it's really important to, in your teaching philosophy, do say that you won't only focus on like classroom time and, hey, let's learn English, but you will find things that the kids like. You will find things that speak to the kids and try to incorporate those into the lessons, so that you can always have the interest and participation of kids. Because when they are bored, nothing goes in, nothing is absorbed. So I hope that helps. Question number 3 read, share your thoughts on encountering cultural differences. How do you plan to adapt to Korean school life and culture? My response was, to adapt to Korean school life, I will strive to develop a good working relationship with my allocated co-teacher and other colleagues. My co-teacher will be a valuable part of my integration process, as I will get to learn and observe from them some of the South Korean values and cultural principles. There are also several experienced EPIK teachers who have blogs and YouTube channels where they share information. I found these very helpful when I was researching about Korea, and I will still use them when I arrive. I will also use the EPIK orientation as an opportunity to ask some questions and clear any misconceptions as soon as possible. Most importantly, I'm excited to learn the Korean language, and I've started taking some online classes. So what we just discussed were the first 3 questions that I got in the interview. And as I said, they align with the application where we wrote our essays. So just remember the important bits of your essay and use those in the responses where you can identify that this question comes from the application form. The next questions were very short and sweet, and they're not in the application. So the first one was, what teaching strategy And what teaching method do I remember from the Tefl course that I took, which I plan to implement in my lessons? And this question was very difficult for me because I had done my Tefl course a year before in 2021, and by then I had honestly forgotten. So I had to thumbsuck something. I just took the teaching strategies that I know, like from teaching. But I think that this won't work, especially if you don't have a teaching background. So please go back and revise that Tefl. You don't have to do like the entire thing. Just browse through the lessons, look at each topic and some of the important things that you can pick up in terms of how to deal with lower level students, how to use TPR, total physical response, in the classroom, whether or not you are allowed to incorporate Korean in some of the lessons that you teach if the students are of a very, very low level. Those are some of the things you have to talk about and think about in terms of teaching in South Korea. The next question I was asked was with regards to where I want to live and the levels of students that I want to teach. So she asked me, would I prefer to teach elementary, middle school or high school kids? And I said, please give me middle school or high school because that's what I teach back home as well. I teach learners who are from 13 up until 18. And that's exactly what I got. Currently, I teach at a middle school full time, and then I go just one day a week to the high school, a vocational high school close by. So yeah, it's very important to think about the levels you want to teach. Do you want to go with like elementary, or would you prefer middle school and high school? One thing to mention though is that if you don't have prior working experience, so let's say you come fresh from university and you've never taught before or you've never worked at any place before, you will most likely get elementary, which is primary school kids, the babies. So depending on your professional development and your age and all of that, you might end up at elementary, even if you say you want to teach middle school or high school. But nothing is guaranteed. As I said, just say what you would prefer and hope for the best. And then the next question was with regards to where I'd like to live. And I said I want to be placed in a rural area because back home, I live in the city. It's very fast paced, and I'm quite exhausted. I want to just mellow down and find a quiet place. And God gave me that. They placed me in a very rural part of South Jeollanam-do, and I really love the city. It's beautiful. I go for morning runs, I go for hikes. It's very nice. I'm more physically active and I'm in touch with nature, so to speak. So yeah, the questions were about, do you want to teach middle school, high school, or elementary, and where do you want to live? As I said, this doesn't guarantee anything. Just answer the question as best as you can and as honestly as you can and hope for the best. And then we move on to the issue of the demo. So you do have to do a demonstration lesson, which is about 5 minutes long. And this can also be the lesson that you included in your application. I would actually highly recommend that you stick to the lesson you wrote in the application. You don't want to think up something completely new and challenge yourself like that in that moment. So just practice a little bit the things that you put in the application. And of course, because it's a 5-minute lesson, it's going to be very short. So you must just focus on the introductory part, like smiling. Hello, students. Today we will learn about. So you just have to smile. You just have to be very articulate. If you have some props that you've prepared, just use those, and don't be extra. Don't use things that will make you maybe go far away from the camera and the interviewer can't hear you, or things that will fall on the floor. I used a whiteboard. So I had a very small whiteboard that I would just hold up and write things on. And that was it. I just wrote noun and pronoun. I did a high school lesson for my demo, so it was really easy, straight to the point, but I focused on looking at the interviewer, smiling, using my hands to gesture, asking questions. Simplify it. The demo isn't hard. It's just a matter of them seeing how you are as a person and them advising you to say, okay, don't ask questions like, do you understand? Don't ask questions like that. These are responses that the interviewer will give you. They'll give you advice on things to avoid perhaps when you start teaching. And of course, this isn't like the end of your training. The feedback you get from the interviewer isn't like all you need when you come here. You will still undergo a week-long orientation program, which will fully equip you for the work that you will do when you start teaching. So yeah, that's all I had prepared for today in terms of the EPIK interview tips, as well as some of the application tips. So I don't want this video to be too long. If you found it useful, please do comment below. If you have questions, comment below. And if you have your interview this week, I really hope that this was helpful. All the very best. And if you finally make it to South Korea, actually, when you finally make it to South Korea, please do inbox me because this is a very small country. We might meet up, get a coffee, and talk about the experience. All the very best and see you in the next video. Bye.